What's up guys, Village Kev Talks here with another video. So I've never done a video quite like this before. It's going to be a little history lesson, but I thought this was kind of different, and you know, there's so much content on YouTube, especially from gay YouTubers, that's superficial and I don't know, just not that deep. I like making videos here and there that are a bit more informative and content that's not like self-based, I guess, if that makes sense. So that's why I wanted to do this theme, the representation of what it means to be gay in media, or at least American media, over time. So am I an expert in this? Absolutely not. But I was a media and communications major in college, and one of the classes that I took for my major was about censorship in American society, in American media. And we had a whole week that was devoted to issues of sexuality and censorship, the censorship of sexuality, and of course homosexuality came into play. So the theory basically is that over time you see a clear evolution of how homosexuality has been depicted in American media, and it starts with the idea or the representation that what it means to be gay, or what it means to be LGBT really in general, is something perverted. It's something perverted, it's something to be feared, and eventually you see a shift towards the victimhood mentality of what it means to be gay. And now we're in a new era, in the new millennium, and we see new depictions. So I'm going to go through each one and dissect it, and as always, so curious to see what you guys think. I'm going to give you some examples from very famous TV shows and movies, but of course you can only talk about so many. If you guys have perfect examples, or even things that you disagree with and you have examples to back it up, I would love to see what you have to say in the comments. So as I mentioned, when homosexuality was first even introduced as a concept in film and TV, what you typically saw was the LGBT person being a predator, being a villain, being something to be afraid of. It was this menacing force. So to give you some examples, check these clips out.
In another moment you might have been strangling each other instead of a chicken. He's got it!
There's nothing like a good murder to whet one's appetite.
My name's Jan. Your name is Jan? God damn it, your name is not Jan, it's Mona Lisa! Baby. My name is Queenie.
It breaks my heart seeing some of these clips. Obviously, in individual doses, it's just another villain, right? If you see a black guy who's a villain in a movie, you don't think, oh, racism. But when you compare all these, and that's the power of media, when you compare all these clips together and all these movies and all these TV shows, there's a rhetoric. There's a rhetoric that's involved, and it's so sad. It breaks my heart to think that being a gay kid growing up in this era, and you're constantly told that what you are is perverted, is purely rooted in deviant sex ideology, and that you're a villain. You're a villain. That's nuts. And then I think about something like Silence of the Lambs, which is an amazing movie. I can't take that away from the film. But to think that that was an Oscar-winning, I believe, I could be wrong, I think it's the only like horror movie that's ever won a Best Picture Oscar. And it's a fantastic movie, and it's thrilling, and it's scary, and it's creepy, and it's all those things, but then you remember that the villain is a trans person. What does that even say? I mean, I guess you could stretch it and say, well, this trans person doesn't feel comfortable being who they are, so then they commit these crazy crimes. You could spin it, I guess, any way that you want, but at the end of the day, it's still a movie about a psychotic person who, oh yeah, happens to be trans. And what does that mean? That has to have an influence over people who watch these films. Then eventually you see a shift. Homosexuality becomes depicted as a victimhood thing. So Philadelphia is a perfect example of this, right? The main character gets HIV, and then it follows this whole story, this whole narrative of what that experience is like.
Good night, my angel. My sweet boy.
Even in reality television, The Real World, one of the first few seasons was iconic for having a man who was HIV positive who eventually died of AIDS. And the show chronicled that. He was like the heart of that cast that year.
He had all these ideas and thoughts, and I knew he wanted to say things and pour out his heart. Talk about how scared he was, and I could see it in his eyes. But he just couldn't do it.
So my instinct is to think, well, it's better to be a victim than be a predator, right? It's better for people to feel bad for you than to see you as something to be afraid of. But the thing is, even though it's maybe slightly better than being seen as a predator or a villain, you're still associated with fear and negativity. You're still something that is rooted in anxiety and negative emotions in terms of how people see you and how they view you. So it's not a great representation, it's just maybe not as awful as some of those previous examples.
The DTs came to me with a picture of her murdered, and they were about to cremate her because nobody had came to verify the body, and I was the one that had to give all this information down to her family. Actually, they found her dead after 4 days, strangled under a bed in a sleazy hotel in New York City.
What's fantastic though is that now I think we see more of a variety. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Modern Family is an example of this. I have trouble with that show. It's a funny show, it's lighthearted, and you could say that every character on that show is like a source of comic relief. You kind of laugh at every single one of the characters, so it's not that the gay guys are singled out. But I always had an issue watching that show feeling that the gay couple was such a stereotype and such a one-dimensional stereotype. They're, campy, pretty effeminate.
Let's go show him our delightful brand of bitchy friction.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Stop seeing eye to eye with me.
Are there gay men who are like that? Absolutely. So should there be a representation of that, especially by gay men, since the show is written by a gay man? So is that an important representation? Absolutely. But it is always frustrating for me when I see depictions of gay men in media that are fulfilling stereotypes, because I'm smart enough to know that that's just one type of gay person, but I feel like people see that, people who are in more, small communities and conservative backgrounds, and I feel like this is what they associate with being gay, so it fulfills that belief system that they already have. But then also, I feel like there are other moments in TV and film where there's a gay character. They're kind of thrown in there for the sake of there being a gay character, but then it's like they're the token gay, and they don't really have a real personality. They're just a one-dimensional person who's there in the background.
Oh my god, the bend and snap works every time!
You know Charlotte?
Oh yeah, sure.
And this is Carrie and Miranda.
So nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
I see you told them.
Kind of like how you've seen with a lot of black characters over time.
I'm supposed to be the only black guy at this party. Shit. Yeah, I know. It's whack.
That stereotype of the black character dies at the start of every horror movie. It's the same kind of idea. You're like, was it worth it to have the black character if they're fulfilling this stereotype of, they're an unimportant, insignificant character that doesn't affect the grand scheme of things, and they're literally like discardable. But overall, I think we're obviously in a much better era.
Do you feel this? Most people don't have this. This is rare.
So what?
You fucked a murderer? What's the big deal? I used a condom.
Well, your safe sex lecture paid off.
Alex, they're adorable. Thank you so much.
We see a variety, whether it is the one-dimensional token gay character,
See, this is the color I want.
This is Damien. He's almost too gay to function.
victim or poor soul story,
I'm gay.
Oh.
You can't tell anyone though.
whether it is a stereotype
The idea of feeling tied down in a relationship is horrifying.
or something with a bit more depth. My hope is that we'll see a gay love story that is positive and uplifting, instead of always like the tragic story of they can't be together because they're not supposed to be gay. Every movie I've ever seen of a gay love story was tragic.
You don't want to face the facts.
No,
you don't
Emma,
want
that's
to
not
face the
true. Look,
facts. Your daughter is turning into a damn man right in front of your eyes, and you can't say.
Every single one I've ever seen, somebody dies, somebody gets beat up because they're gay.
Do it, move.
And that happens in real life, so it's important for that to be depicted. But my hope is that we see more and more representations of gay men and LGBT people where it's a positive, feel-good story. That is my hope. And also stories where maybe the character just happens to be gay, but it doesn't affect everything in the film. And I think we'll get there eventually. It's baby steps, and everything needs to go through these growing pains to evolve into something better. We've seen the same thing with race. I mean, to think that in this country we went from blackface.
You seem to be enjoying yourself this evening. Enjoying myself? I sure is.
To the president was black. There's still a lot of work to be done, but all of this stuff is gradual. There's definitely a lot more growth that's necessary for the depiction of what it means to be gay in media, but I think we're on our way. Again, let me know what you think in the comments.